and so forth. So those first four are really to do with this purification and accumulation. To accumulate through generosity, making offerings, to purify the mind by declaring your negative actions. So that is a little bit the four opponent powers. So this here is the purification and accumulation. And then it says here, please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. So this is a little bit with the Guru Yoga in making requests to the teacher, which we also see in the next verse, the request. So this Guru Yoga is a very extensive tantric practice, but at our level, at sutra level, Guru Yoga, of course, the purpose of Guru Yoga is to receive inspiration and the seed of wisdom from the teacher. So at our level, we can do a simple request like this one here mentioned in this verses here. Where it says, please bless me to cease all deluded minds immediately, from disrespect to the Gurus to subtlest dualistic conception. Bless me to generate all unmistaken minds instantly, from respect to the Gurus to the realization of emptiness. Bless me to completely pacify all outer and inner obstacles. So here we are making this request to our teacher to really guide us in our practice, to really help us in our practice. And here we see this word bless. To bless me. And often people, and we have this a lot in Tibetan Buddhism, this idea of a blessing. And then people often have this very strange idea what that means, you know. Sometimes when I'm in Dharamsala and His Holiness Dalai Lama is there, and you know, sometimes people say, oh, Dalai Lama is giving a blessing today. And then everyone goes, oh, wow, let's go. And so then people think that they'll go there, the Dalai Lama will say some things, and then somehow they'll be zapped and they'll see the light, or they'll have some sort of mystical experience or something. This is not blessing. In fact, one time I was there, fortunately, I was very fortunate, I was with a small group and we had a private audience with His Holiness Dalai Lama. And he was talking about a particular topic, I can't remember what the topic was, but then at some point he stopped and said, I can't give you a blessing. He said, whether you get a blessing from me is up to you. It's up to you. And the word blessing in Tibetan is chinlap. And chinlap literally means to transform your mind into a magnificent state. So blessing is not something that comes from outside, it's coming from inside. Dalai Lama or other people can be a condition, but the cause is within your own mind. So you could be in the presence of Dalai Lama and receive no blessing. You could be in the presence of someone who seems very ordinary and get a lot of blessing. It's what's going on in your own mind, is to feel some inspiration to transform your own mind. It's not like someone, he's going to wave a magic wand and zap you or something. That's not going to happen. And here in the text, in terms of the Guru Yoga, if we go back to the front of the text, it says, then from the depths of your heart, make repeated requests to your root Guru, so that we can do, like we saw here in the verse at the back here, this repeated request, to your root Guru, who is kind in three ways, seeing them as inseparable from all the past, present, and future Buddhas, or as the essence of the three jewels combined. So a couple of things here. Firstly, we have this word root Guru. And it says here, the root Guru is someone who's been kind to us in three ways. So we often talk about, and again, the word Guru literally means someone heavy with qualities, and we're talking about someone who is a qualified teacher of Vajrayana or Tantra, someone highly experienced in Tantra or Vajrayana level of practice. And the word guru, translated into Tibetan, is lama. But I think now the word lama is used very loosely and often as a sign of respect for an elder monk, perhaps. So if someone's called lama this or lama that, we shouldn't automatically assume they're a qualified teacher of Tantra or Vajrayana. We need to check them out. I mean, of course, in general, that is the recommendation, because also we see other titles like Rinpoche and Tulku and all of these titles. And then, of course, we hear these titles and we go, wow, they must be someone special. But regardless of what a person's title is, we need to check them out. That's always the advice. Even if that person is a Dalai Lama, we check them out if we want to receive instructions from them, to see if they're authentic. And that's the advice in the texts. Otherwise, we can end up with a lot of difficulty, a lot of problems. Now, of course, we're talking here about a personal teacher. Of course, we can go and see many different teachers and listen to teachings, no problem. But here, when we're talking about a guru or personal teacher, before taking on someone as a personal teacher, we need to thoroughly check them out. In fact, in some texts, Tibetan texts, they often even talk about checking out the teacher for up to 12 years. Of course, what we need to remember is that the time when these texts were written, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe the teacher came to your village once a year. So maybe it takes many visits, many years before you can be sure that this person is authentic. So it could take many years because you had no access of checking him out except for that one time a year that he comes to your village. But of course, in the modern world, things are a little bit different. We can check teachers out more thoroughly, more quickly, I think. But again, the bottom line is to check out a teacher thoroughly before accepting them as a personal teacher. Because otherwise, if we don't, we can end up in a lot of difficulties. And we see that, people seeing someone else who seems to be very charismatic, maybe they've got a lot of followers, and they go, wow, that person, they look so fantastic, I'll follow them, I'll do whatever they say. And then unfortunately, often the case is that this person is not so qualified and maybe actually doesn't have a very good motivation, and maybe their motivation is to exploit you financially and even sexually. So we do not want to get ourselves in that situation. So therefore, we need to check out the teacher thoroughly. And if we ask for any personal advice, then we need to, I think if we want to ask personal advice, we better be prepared to follow it. If we're not prepared to follow what the advice they give us, better not ask. Otherwise, we're just fooling ourselves. We're fooling ourselves. Because if we're not prepared to follow it, it just means we want to hear something nice from them. And that's not in our best interest. But of course, if the advice they give us, to us, seems to be unethical, we must not follow that advice under any circumstance. Of course, if they're a qualified teacher, then they, of course, they wouldn't give us advice that is unethical. So usually if we receive some advice that seems unethical, it's because we didn't check them out properly and they're not really a qualified teacher. But if we believe that advice to be unethical, we must not follow it. And we must ask the teacher to explain how this is not unethical. And if they can't give us a satisfactory explanation, do not follow that advice. And then what to do if we have connected with a teacher and then later we find out they're not very qualified, in fact maybe they're quite unethical. Then the advice is separate, cut from that teacher, have nothing more to do with them. But what's not advised is then to have a negative state of mind, because that's not helping anything. But certainly to not have anything more to do with that teacher. Now, there's a question there, sorry.
How do I practically check out the teacher before I know?
Practically?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. How to practically check, of course, what can be very good is to, if they're giving teaching somewhere, to go there and sit there and listen and see whether what they're saying makes sense. you know, or they just sort of just saying all sorts of things and it's not really making any sense. So that's one thing, is to just be in their presence and then see how they're behaving to people around them. Are they being kind to them, or are they being very harsh to people around them? And of course, these days, a lot of the teachers are within a particular tradition, and then what you can do is ask other people who are really highly regarded as qualified in that tradition what their opinion is of this person. So we can check out that way. If a person is not really part of an organisation or tradition, they're just doing their own thing, then we need to be very super cautious. Super cautious. And fortunately these days, if they really are very unethical, the news spreads quite quickly these days. And so usually then it sort of becomes known, particularly if they're really exploiting people, it becomes known quite quickly that they're not authentic. But bottom line is, you know, don't cut yourself short. Really check them out. One more thing first, and then maybe more questions. I just want to answer this here. It says, you're a root guru who is kind in 3 ways. So what is a root guru, and what does these 3 kindnesses mean? Root guru is the one who you really have that close connection with, and usually the one who gives you the main practices. Here, I've got a quote from Kalu Rinpoche, who's a highly regarded teacher in the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition. He says, the root lama, or root guru, is the one who causes us to recognize the nature of our mind. They are the source of the blessings that introduce us to Mahamudra, the ultimate nature of the mind. They show us how to recognize our mind as the Dharmakaya. And the Dharmakaya, of course, is the enlightened mind. And it says here in the text that the root guru is kind in 3 ways. So we can talk about 3 kindnesses of the root guru. And so here, remember, we're talking about a teacher qualified in Tantra Vajrayana. So we're talking about someone who's bringing us into the Tantra level of practice. So the Tantric guru is kind to us in 3 ways. The first way is they give us empowerment. Remember, empowerment is the door of entry into Tantra. So they introduce us into the practice by giving us an empowerment. Then, of course, the practice they introduce us to, they explain that. So they explain the Tantra. So usually when we get empowerment, we get a particular, what's called sadhana practice of a particular yidam or deity, Tara, Chenrezig or something. So they would explain that particular tantric practice. And then they would give us personal instructions. Meaning they would give us personal instructions on how we as an individual should do this practice.
What is the word before empowerment?
Confer means to give, to confer. Usually we use the word confer, means to give empowerment. So this is how the root guru is kind to us in 3 ways, by doing this for us. There was a question at the back, yeah.
Going back to the request.
Request, yeah, on at the back page, yeah.
To whom is the request lessly directed?
Sorry, to who, the what?
To whom is the request lessly directed?
Again, we can do this. It's called the merit field, and it depends on. It could be, for example, our personal teacher. So, as part of this, usually earlier, we visualize what's called the merit field in front of us, and that can take many forms. If we have a personal teacher, a guru, we could have them there. So we're doing it for our personal teacher. If we don't have a personal teacher, we could have someone we highly respect like Dalai Lama or Buddha or someone like that there. And that can be very elaborate. You can also have lots of other, like in Buddhism we talk about the two wings of wisdom and compassion. So often in this visualization we may have the Buddha or your teacher or Lama Tsongkhapa if you're in the Geluk, or maybe Milarepa if you're following Kagyu, or like this. You can choose. And then often together with that you have on one side Manjushri, which is symbolizing wisdom, and the other side Chenrezig or Maitreya, symbolizing compassion. And sometimes this merit field we can do very elaborate, including all the lineage lamas, all the lineage teachers. Like if we're practicing Mahamudra, we could visualize here from our teacher to their teacher to their teacher, go all the way back to the Buddha. We could do that if we want. That's very extensive. But I think as a beginner, it's good to keep it simple. So if we have a personal teacher, we can do that. We can say, please inspire me, guide me in my practice. I think that's the best. Otherwise, what happens sometimes is people do these elaborate visualizations, but the idea is to have this connection, to receive inspiration and wisdom. But if it's just an elaborate visualization, but it's just colours and shapes, and we have no connection, doesn't really help, I think. Yeah. Then we break for lunch.
About the three kindnesses, I think sometimes it happens that you get the empowerment and the explanation of the Tantra from one teacher. And this teacher may be or unavailable for you to meet, or he died, or whatever. And then the personal instructions will be from somebody else.
Sure.
But you call the root guru only the one that you get the empowerment for, or anybody who helps you with the past?
I mean, often, yeah, so the question is, who's the root guru? And often they say it's the one who gives us our main practice. But also here, Kala Rinpoche is sort of saying that actually it's the one, now we're talking more specific Mahamudra, it's the one who introduces us to the nature of our mind. The one who maybe gives us some instruction and we have some, ooh, maybe they didn't give us the empowerments or something, but we got some instructions and really something shifted. That's our root guru.
Thank you.
Because that's the one who's really helping us very closely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, lunchtime, so let's break there. I think we've got an hour for lunch, yeah? 1 hour, right? 1 hour. So back at 1:30, and then after the break, in next session, we'll have a brief look at the Tantra level of practice. So remember the silence, so if you really have to use your phone or talk, please go to the other side of the car park.